Sunday morning, VCers. Hope everyone is doing well. This is Matt. Wanted to continue with the Kinks, which brings us to 1969 and Arthur, or the Decline and Fall of the British Empire. This is, in my opinion, the final album of their golden run of near perfect albums. They'd make a lot of good music after this, great music sometimes even, and to be fair, a lot of not so good music, but they would never quite scale the heights that they achieved from that run of 1964 to 1969, in my opinion. Now, a lot of people place the end of their golden run with Lola, the album that follows Arthur. Some even pick Muswell Hillbillies, the album after Lola. Both of those albums have their merits, but to me, they just don't quite match the special quality and the magic of the Arthur and the albums that preceded it. So, and a lot of people argue that Arthur is the Kinks' finest moment. Kind of hard to argue with that. Personally, I would give Village Green Preservation Society, the album that came out before this, the edge, but it's just a matter of degrees because both of these albums are so just wonderful and perfect, in my opinion, and essential that it's kind of like trying to compare Day Tripper with Ticket to Ride. I mean, which one do you like better? You might have a favorite, but both of those songs are just so perfect, and that's the case with both of these albums. So I will give Arthur a slight edge in one way, that there's not a bad song on here, and by not a bad song I don't mean it's full of good songs. I mean every song on here is just greatness, in my opinion, and Village Green does have a song or two that's not bad, but just okay. But so yeah, Arthur by the Kinks, and there's a big change in the Kinks with this album. Pete Quaife, the original bass player who had been with the band since the beginning, left the band after Village Green, so he's not on this album. There's a guy named John Dalton who takes over as the bass player. Quaife, after he left the Kinks, essentially left music for all intents and purposes. He joined a band called Maple Oak. After he left the Kinks, they did 145 that he played on, both songs I imagine. I've never heard them, so I don't really know what they sound like. That 45 sunk without a trace and did nothing. Quaife left the band at that point. The band went on to make one album, which he doesn't play on. That album didn't do anything and the band broke up. What happened to the other people in that band, I have no idea. But at that point, Quaife lived in Denmark for a while, and later he moved to Canada. He worked as a commercial artist and a cartoonist for the rest of his life. The only time he got on stage otherwise, as far as I know, is that in 1981 the Kinks played a Canadian concert, and he joined them on stage for a couple of songs during the encore, and I think that's really the only time he did anything musical after leaving the Kinks and, well, Maple Oak. But sadly, Quaife died in 2010. There had been, I remember hearing, 10 or so years ago, there was some talk about getting the original Kinks, because the band essentially broke up in the late 90s, mid to late 90s, but there was some talk about getting the original band members together to do some shows, and unfortunately that never happened, and Quaife is no longer with us. So I remember talking to some friends, this was a few years back, about what bands from the 60s still had all the original members still living, and we came up with a pretty short list, which at that time was the Kinks, Pink Floyd, the Monkees, and Cream, and unfortunately Cream is the only one left of that now. I'm sure you could find some kind of obscure girl group or Motown group or one of the lesser known British invasion groups that still have all the members. But even, the Dave Clark Five and the Animals, there's several people that have passed on from those bands. So maybe everyone in Herman's Hermits or Freddie and the Dreamers is still alive. I don't really know. But back to Arthur. So it's 1969, which is the era of the concept album and the rock opera. Arthur is essentially both. The album, of course, 1969 is Tommy by The Who. and then later examples being Quadrophenia by The Who in '73 and The Wall by Pink Floyd in '79, and there are other examples earlier, even with SF Sorrow by The Pretty Things. As far as rock operas go, this one is the best of the bunch. Tommy is a good album. I like it when I'm in the mood, but Arthur just kicks it to the curb. I mean, this album is 100 times better than Tommy could ever hope to be honest, which is not to say that Tommy's a bad album. But Arthur came about because of a TV show that was going to be on BBC, show about a guy named Arthur, and Granada TV, not sure what that is, probably a production company, they wanted to make this show about this guy named Arthur. I think it was supposed to be just a one-off special, like a TV movie or whatever they had in England back in those days. So the people behind all this approached Ray Davies and asked him if he would write songs for the Arthur show. He agreed to do that and got to work writing the songs. Ray, I think, even had a hand in helping write the script for this show. And the show got as far as the script being completed, or at least mostly completed. I think they even talked to actors that they wanted to hire to play the roles, and as far as setting up dates to start shooting the show. And then the financing fell through, so the show's never been made, but Ray had all the songs, and so that became the next Kinks album. So the good thing about this, and it's a shame that in the 40 years since nobody's seen fit to go ahead and make the show and use these songs, because it kind of sounded like it might have been a neat little TV movie show. But yeah, so the other thing about this, as far as rock operas, most of them, when you're thinking of Tommy, Quadrophenia, The Wall, and all, they've got a story of sorts, which is a little bit convoluted in many cases, kind of silly, especially in something like Tommy, which, even though I like the album, sounds like I'm running it down. I'm really not meaning to, but I mean, the story of the deaf, dumb, and blind pinball playing kid that might be, some kind of prophet or something is a bit, but it was the hippie days, so I guess it fit. But a lot of songs on those albums can stand up just as songs on their own, and a lot of the songs on there also are just sort of transitory pieces of music or bridge pieces to kind of keep the story going. And so if you take them outside the concept of listening to the whole Tommy or The Wall from front to back and just listen to them on their own, they don't really add up to much. And that's the beauty with Arthur, is that you can listen to any of these songs just by themselves, and they're just brilliant songs, every single song on this album. I mean, there's one song, Young and Innocent Days, which might be the least of the bunch, but even that's a great song. It's just, if you've got your 12 songs, one of them's got to be the least of the bunch, but everything on here is brilliant. So you can listen to every song on here just as its own and enjoy it just as a piece of rock and roll pop music, or you can listen to it in the concept of the story of Arthur. And so if you're listening to this album front to back and you're paying any attention at all to the lyrics, you're obviously going to know that these songs connect and tell some kind of story. So what is Arthur? Well, it's a loose story. It's not so much, because these songs were meant to be part of a TV show where be a film, and the songs would kind of help move the narrative of the film along more than the songs would themselves be a complete, here's the beginning, here's the middle, here's the end, here's the plot, and that's the story of Arthur. So they're not so much that, they're more like snapshots of this guy Arthur's life at various points in his life, from when he's born to when he's young to when he's old and gray and everything in between. So, and it works really well like that. But like I said, you can enjoy the story, or you can just enjoy this as an album of songs, just like Rubber Soul or something that's just not a concept album, it's just an album of songs. And so yeah, we start off, and the story, and this is really going to excite you. Arthur is a kind of a lower middle class guy in England who is a carpet layer. Exciting, like I said, and it's about his life. He was born kind of at the end of Queen Victoria's reign. He grows up, his brother gets killed in World War II, his son gets killed in the Korean War, his daughter and her husband, England, being after kind of the England won the war but lost the empire. You've all heard that. So the limited opportunities for, regular people in England after the war being limited. His daughter and her husband are moving to Australia, kind of like people go to America. Australia was also a land of opportunity, and the action takes place on the eve of them leaving England to go to Australia, and Arthur's thinking back on his life, and et cetera, et cetera. So, which doesn't sound like the most exciting plot there is, but I mean, it really, really is a lot more interesting than Tommy or The Wall when you listen to the album. And so yeah, the album starts off Victoria, Queen Victoria, which is when Arthur's born. Yes Sir, No Sir, which is about the military and about the class system in England, sort of the structured class system and conformity and how people just kind of blindly follow that. Brilliant songs, both of those, great openings. Some Mother's Son is one of the best indictments about the horror and loss of war that you're ever going to hear. Driving has to do with just the joys of taking a drive in the country on a Sunday. Also ties into, you remember with Anthony Eden saying, let Hitler have Poland and he'll be satisfied and shut up and go away. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. So we had World War II, but I mean the whole English thought system of the time that, let the rest of the world fight that war. We don't need to get involved in this, and it'll all be wrapped up pretty soon anyway, which didn't happen. Brainwashed is a great song. Australia's obviously the daughter and them going to Australia. Shangri-La is one of Open Side 2, one of Ray's most beautiful songs, and one of his best. It's up there with Waterloo Sunset and Autumn Almanac. Mr. Churchill Says is a funny song. It's a great song. The guy who I guess is Arthur has a hat like Anthony Eden because he thinks it makes him look like a lord, but he can't afford a Rolls or a Bentley. He has to drive a second-hand Ford. So it's kind of like people trying to rise above their station and put on airs to some extent. Ray's at one point sympathetic to him, and at the other point kind of poking fun at him a bit. Nothing to Say and Arthur. This is the one thing about this album is with the Something Else and Village Green, those albums are incredibly just damn near perfect and great. They're a softer style of music than the Kinks' early days of the garage rock and punk of All Day and All of the Night and You Really Got Me and Till the End of the Day, but they're no less powerful by any means. The one great thing about Arthur is that the guitar is back, and whereas it never really left, it's in Village Green and Something Else to some degree, but a lot of songs on those albums are based more around horns and string sections and harpsichords and pianos than they are guitar driven. Here you get a lot of songs that start off with the kind of softer harpsichord or the military drum beat cadence or strings, but by the end of the song it's just blowing and going and rocking, and Dave's playing guitar, and that's apparent on the first song, Victoria, because there's some really great guitar in there, and while Ray's singing you hear Dave in the background. You can picture him just hopping around in joy. He's screaming and yelling and yelping, probably because he's glad to finally have a chance to cut loose on the guitar again after a couple of years and 2 or 3 albums of a more muted version of the Kinks, and it's just a joy. And there's also some drawn out songs on here. Australia's 6 minutes and 40 seconds long. Shangri-La's 5 minutes 17. Arthur's 5:20. That's a new thing. That's a rarity for the Kinks because heretofore their songs had all been at the 2 to 3 minute length. So they kind of draw things out. They don't noodle around, and it's not hippie jams and Grateful Dead or anything like that, but they do draw the songs out with some really great, exciting, energized guitar playing and singing and vocal breakdowns, and it's just a joy from beginning to end. It's a wonderful album. Like I said, if I was to rate this, I would give it a 10 out of 10, same as I did their last few albums. And the other good news on this is that the Kinks ban in America would be lifted about the time this album came out, so they finally got to return to America in late '69 and start touring again, which they did pretty much non-stop through the '70s, which helped them kind of become popular again in the very late '70s and then through the early '80s. So yeah, this is an essential album, one of the very best. Uh, Knowing full well that the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and Led Zeppelin and some other heavyweights released albums in 1969, I would say this is the top album of 1969, and it's one if you don't know much about the Kinks other than You Really Got Me, you might want to, and you want to dip your toe. There's plenty of albums to buy, but I would say certainly go out and get you Greatest Hits that has You Really Got Me and All Day and All of the Night and Sunny Afternoon, and certainly get you a copy of Village Green and Arthur. Those are the three just completely essential things that you need, and you can stretch out from there if you find that you love the Kinks. So yeah, so they got to return to touring. Things would be different after this. And next up is Lola, which is Arthur, of course, did nothing in the United States, sales-wise or chart-wise. It had its fans, but it was a pretty small base by that time, unfortunately. And this should have been number one for 2 or 3 months and spun off hit single after hit single in a better world. But oddly enough, when everyone had pretty much forgot the Kinks existed, on their next album they popped back up with Lola, one of the biggest hits of their career. Go figure. We'll talk about Lola next time. But just trying to remember if there's anything that I wanted to talk about and forgot here, other than to say, you know, like I've said before, not having this is as silly as not having Sergeant Pepper or Abbey Road in your collection. This is as good as it gets. So Arthur, the Kinks, I know the concept doesn't sound that interesting, but it really is when you listen to the record, and the songs are just indescribable and how good they are. So hope everyone has a good Sunday. Might be back to do a response to the Prince of Records contest that's going on. Check out his channel if you haven't already, and have a good one, everyone.